So there are many microstates. Often they are basically selling their sovereignty because they are on the periphery of global markets. They don't have many resources to develop an economy, but what they have is a law-making capacity. They're happy to make laws to provide secrecy to companies. Companies in many places can write their own laws. At least in Canada, US and other places, there may be some scrutiny from civil society. I looked at the island of Jersey a few years ago. Every member of parliament was a minister, so therefore there was no scrutiny of any legislation. There are no political parties. Only one newspaper at that time which was owned by a senior politician. So therefore no scrutiny of any kind. Trade unions are weak, NGOs don't exist. And there was no written record at that time of parliamentary debates on any bills. If you wanted to know what went in Parliament, for a 30-minute audio cassette you had to pay £10 sterling, that's about $17. You had to be very rich to listen to the whole debate. And basically infrastructure is not there at all in many places, and so you have to have a look. So these places are using their sovereignty to provide shelter, to put loose capital, and are generally engaged in a race to the bottom, so that you can eventually have 0% taxes or even negative taxes for the rich and big corporations. And they are protected by larger hegemons. More of that in a moment. So hedge funds can operate in London, but actually registered in places like Guernsey. Guernsey does not really have a capacity to regulate any of the world's biggest corporations. Many of these islands do not require companies to publish any set of accounts. There are no accounts, there are no audits. There are nothing filed with any regulator other than just a name and address, which would usually be a box number. You can't find out anything. There's one guy in the island of Sark, which is near London. He's director of 2,500 companies. Just a post arrives and he passes it on. No accountability, nothing. This world has been created by big corporations, law firms, and accountancy firms. Companies are taxed on profits depending on where they are registered, rather than where they make. So again, they generally escape many of the public accountability requirements. So the secrecy provides opportunities for tax avoidance. So banking crisis, we find out that the Carlyle Capital Corporation collapsed in Guernsey, but Guernsey didn't know anything about it. But it was registered in Guernsey. So what do we know about the size of tax havens? Size of offshore world. Around 50% of global trade is invoiced through tax havens. Some examples I'll show you in a moment, real examples, they will not be made up. Okay? Tax havens have about 2 to 3 million corporations, unknown number of trusts and foundations. So we don't know usually who's behind them at all. Okay? 99% of EU companies have operations in tax havens. 75% of the top US businesses, i.e. quoted companies quoted on the SEC, on the New York Stock Exchange, have some links with tax havens, but they usually don't want to tell us a great deal about them. About $11.5 trillion of wealth is estimated to be registered by rich individuals alone. This is about a decade-old piece of information, may even be more. So if you imagine what that might earn by way of income, and if you taxed it onshore, i.e. the people who are hiding the stash, the loot in these places, if they pay tax, will solve many of our problems. But again, they don't actually declare this. Most of the offshore transactions are managed onshore, London, New York, and other places. Okay? And 50% of all cross-border assets are held in such locations. And often we don't know the details either. So again, companies are booking assets in these places. So the easiest way to confuse everybody, and that is what accountancy firms do, they will advise clients to have a subsidiary, say in Jersey, which is owned by another company in Cayman. Its directors are in Belize, and you immediately play off one jurisdiction against another, and you make it almost impossible to trace assets, income, and taxes. For that little advice I just explained to you, they charge £10,000 sterling. So that's been at least you can say you've gone away with some benefit from this afternoon. 60% of world trade is made up of internal transfers within multinational corporations, which means there is a huge scope for tax avoidance through transfer pricing. And again, I'll give you an example in a moment. EU is losing well over 2% of its GDP to tax avoidance. US about 345 billion, UK about 100 billion. Money laundering is between 2% and 5% of global GDP. Narcotics, prostitution, trade in human organs, theft, bank robberies, you name it. And there's just a vast amount of money, and most of it at some stage passes through these offshore places, and that is where the trail becomes impossible to follow because there is secrecy. Okay? So tax havens are everywhere. Enron scandal reminded us how Enron booked, for example, transactions to do with its operations in India through Cayman Islands and paid no taxes. Okay? So the earnings were reported higher, stock markets are celebrated, but millions of people went without essentials of education, healthcare, clean water, and so on. WorldCom, KPMG devised schemes for it, and WorldCom was using tax havens. UBS has recently paid $780 million fine, should have been shut down, for facilitating tax evasion, but it wasn't. KPMG paid $456 million fine, should have been shut down, but it wasn't. That is one way to bring some retribution to these organizations, and many others are involved. I've just given you some names, keeping an eye on the watch here. Okay. Microsoft books its revenues in Ireland. So overnight, a Microsoft subsidiary became one of the world's biggest corporations because Microsoft was giving tax holidays to companies who are engaged in research and development. Well, of course, you would say you're developing your software, that is research and development, therefore you claim tax holidays, and there was also low tax rate as well. So again, Microsoft took advantage of that. Very few employees. So imagine if each multinational had to publish a table telling us the jurisdiction they operate from, telling us what their income, expenses, asset, liabilities, employees, tax payment is in each country. At a glance we would see Microsoft has a lot of employees in the US, but very little revenue. How is that possible? News Corp, which back home has Sky TV, Sunday Times, the Daily Times, the Sun, News of the World, has not paid corporation taxes since about 1988. Again, we could, by looking at our table, say, just a minute, how is that possible? You have lots of sales, lots of people employed in the UK, but no taxes. So we need more information. But the irony is that the accounting regulator, International Accounting Standards Board, which is supposed to be making accounting standards, is owned by a foundation which is registered in Delaware. The reason for Delaware registration is so that it does not have to pay tax on donations made to it. That is a great start, isn't it? We fill the world up with regulators whose starting point is we don't want to be accountable, we don't want to pay taxes, and they're going to introduce transparency to everybody else. Well, lunatics are indeed running the asylum. So, example from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where companies are avoiding taxes by using transfer pricing and basically transferring the profits to offshore accounts. So developing countries are being looted. Okay. Again, this is a Greenpeace report. These slides would be on the conference website, so you can have a look at it more later on. So an organization, I think we had a colleague earlier from Global Integrity. There is another organization called Global Financial Integrity. They have looked into this as well.